Landlords are using apartment warehousing and leaving their units empty to get around New York City rent control laws. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's going over a topic called apartment warehousing. Now, this is specific to these cities that are under rent control laws, and basically what landlords are doing is they're leaving their units empty. And the reason they're leaving them units empty is because it doesn't make any sense for them to spend tens of thousands or millions of dollars renovating all of these empty units, right, when they can't rent them out and then be able to still make a profit. They're basically, darned if they do and darned if they don't, okay? They lose the rental income if they don't rent those units out, but at the same time, they lose if they have to do all those tens of thousands of dollars worth of renovations, and then they aren't able to raise their rent to cover that, that new cost. So, they've put landlords in this horrible situation, and now they're upset. They're like, well, how dare they leave all these units empty? Well, what did you expect, okay? When you put a rent control law in place, when you put these artificial price controls in place, the only thing you're doing is making sure that there are less rental units available for the people who need them, okay? They're not going to build more. You're not going to go out and you're not going to find landlords saying, oh, I'm going to build a brand new rent-controlled apartment complex. Only an idiot would do that, okay? Or they were getting huge tax subsidies, right? And that's another part of this story. So just a little while ago, New York City canceled the tax subsidies that were being given to landlords and real estate developers who had these new buildings that had lower cost housing, okay? So when they took those tax credits away, that discouraged more development. Okay, they saw it as a huge handout to these greedy corporations. Well, the only thing they're doing is, they're hurting themselves. They're making it so that it's harder and harder for people to find affordable housing within the city. And you know what? I just, at this point, I don't care. I don't care if it's hard to find a place in New York. That is the system you created with all of your stupid laws. And now, you made your bed, go sleep in it, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? Is it wrong that a landlord is leaving their unit empty, okay? Should a landlord have the right to not rent out their unit? That's what the tenant advocates and all are saying, that landlords should be forced to rent out these rent control units at low prices. Well, I tell them, listen, if we have one thing left for our property rights, even in New York, we have the right not to operate a business if we don't want to. And that is exactly what these landlords are doing, and I don't blame them. So let's get into this article. So this article is coming from thecity.nyc, and it says, more than 60,000 rent-stabilized apartments are now vacant, and tenant advocates say landlords are holding them for ransom. The number of empty regulated apartments nearly doubled between 2020 and 2021, a state memo obtained by the city shows. And this article is pretty good because it actually goes into the statistics of how many rent control units they lost in New York City. And this is just showing you that the stuff I've been saying for a while is true, okay? Landlords are converting their units into condos or co-ops in New York. Co-ops are pretty popular. Or, in some cases, they're just leaving the places empty because there's no profit to be made off of them. Some of them are hoping for legislative changes that make it so that they can operate their business profitably. And some of them have found a few tweaks and cheats and ways around the system so that they can raise the rents and make a profit off of their buildings and their units, okay? So I don't blame the landlords for doing this stuff. What I think, though, is that the whole system up there is so screwed up because of this rent control or rent stabilization or whatever they want to call it, right? That they've created their own mess. So let's get into the article. During a worsening housing affordability crisis, New York City landlords are keeping tens of thousands of rent-stabilized units off the market, a phenomenon tenant activists call warehousing. An internal state housing agency memo obtained by the city shows that the number of rent-stabilized homes reported vacant on annual apartment registrations rose to over 61,000 in 2021, nearly doubling from less than 34,000 in just a year as the city emerged from COVID lockdown. That's higher than the official count in the New York City Housing and Vacancy Survey conducted in 2021 by the U.S. Census Bureau on behalf of the city's housing agency, which tallied 42,860 vacant and unavailable rent-stabilized apartments citywide. Rent-stabilized apartments represent nearly half of all rental housing in the city and are among the most affordable places to live in New York. Rents in stabilized buildings are often lower even than those offered as income-restricted affordable housing. And that last line there should tell you that something is wrong, okay? So they created income-restricted affordable housing so that when developers build this new housing, they build housing that is affordable to people who live in the area. But rent-controlled units are actually cheaper than that. So that tells you that rent control prices are way, way below what the market is charging overall, okay? And that's a huge problem because guess what? The real estate prices in New York are huge, and that means that a landlord is unable to actually make a profit off of their building with these super low rents. The data memo also reports an 8% drop from 2019 to 2021 in the number of apartments registered as rent stabilized. 927,753 registered units in 2019 and 857,791 units registered for 2021 as of the March 2022 deadline. As late registrations come in, this number may shrink, but it's matched by a roughly equal drop in the number of apartments reported as rent stabilized on property tax bills between 2019 and 2020, an analysis by the city found. It was the largest such decline in 15 years. So basically from 2019 to 2021, the number of rent-controlled units in New York City declined by 8%. That is humongous, okay? That is a ton of these rent control units just disappearing. And I can't blame the landlords. I would do the exact same. I would do anything I could to get out of the rent stabilization game. I wouldn't even invest there, honestly. But those landlords who do, those developers and those people who have the money and have the patience, they make a good profit. But it takes a lot of money, okay? And they have to find ways to get around these laws. Otherwise, they can't even do basic maintenance on their buildings. They can't pay for capital expenditures. What happens when a boiler goes out and it's going to cost, $100,000 and you can't raise your rent 5 cents? That's ridiculous. Now, these tenants, what they end up with, and this is what they don't realize, right? They end up with old, obsolete, outdated, unsafe, properties that are slowly deteriorating into the ground. And for the landlords who are truly struggling, you see this all the time, and they're complaining, oh, why can't they repair this stuff? Why is this take so long to get fixed? Why are these repairs going on? Because you're not paying enough rent to actually cover the cost of maintaining the building. You don't understand because you have no common sense. You think that everything is free because the government has been coddling you for so long. That's the problem with these socialist systems and these socialists, right? They think the government is, should be in charge of everything. But maybe that's what the whole plan is, right? To eventually drive all these landlords out of business and have it so that the government is the only one providing housing. Well, you know what? Take a look at the New York City Housing Authority and why they are ranked as one of the worst. I think they are ranked as the worst landlord in New York City almost every year. Okay? If you think that that would be a good idea to have more government ownership of these buildings, you're an idiot. Altogether, the state numbers show a loss of over 95,000 stabilized apartments for rent after 2019. The year a major overhaul in Albany of the state's rent laws blocked landlords from significantly jacking up rents on vacant units when letting them to new tenants, right? So in New York, they passed this law in 2019, right? And basically, they had something called vacancy decontrol, and that allowed landlords to raise rents up when a unit became empty, raise them up significantly, right? And that way they were able to compensate for some of the loss. Well, they removed that. So now the next tenant has to pay the same super low rent control price as the previous tenant. So yeah, that made a lot of landlords not able to make any money and not able to cover their expenses. So that is why there's this huge jump in the number of units that were removed from the market. They don't seem to realize that the laws they are passing with, oh, well, this will help tenants. No, it's not. It's not going to help them, okay? It's only going to make things worse. Now, the real problem in New York is that there aren't enough units, okay? We need just a ton more development. Now, I realize there's not a ton of space in New York City, right? And development is going to be extremely expensive, but it doesn't make it any cheaper when you have so much government regulation, so many rules. You got so many things that make it even harder for a developer to build. So yeah, they've basically done this to themselves, okay? The progressives, the left-leaning politicians, they've done it to themselves. They've made New York a place that is anti-development. They've, told landlords that, hey, we don't give a crap if you make any money or not. And now landlords are taking their properties off the market. And that is going to continue to happen. I don't know if we're going to continue to see an 8% decline next year or the next 2 years or what, but all I know is that the number of rent controlled units is only going to get lower and lower and lower. And how does that help a new person who wants to move into the city of New York? It doesn't, okay? It doesn't help them at all. Instead, that person is going to say, hey, I can't afford to live in New York, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Texas. I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to go anywhere outside of New York. And that's why you see population declines in places like that, because they don't give a crap about anything, to actually help people find housing.